Yet to go live.
It is. I thought it showed live. No?
Oh, it showed live?
Yeah, it shows live.
It's
It shows live.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Shows. There it is. It's there on
Cool.
top.
yeah. Okay, so we have 120 people already who have joined. Great, I think we can get started with this
Yeah,
122 now.
sure.
Great. Hello and welcome everyone. I'm your host and moderator Anurag. I'm the CEO and co-founder HireSure.ai. Thank you so much, firstly, for taking the time to join this fascinating conversation on solution to candidate dropout. Now, the problem of candidates dropping out after receiving an offer is very, very real. We've talked to many founders and people working in talent acquisition and have found that of every 100 offers that are released, only 50 candidates become an employee. Today, we'll be discussing some of the solutions that have been deployed to tackle this problem and which of them is actually working. And to ensure that we are helping you the best as we can, there's a comment section also in the right side where you can start posting your questions. We'll be taking that up towards the end of our session. Also, please do not worry about taking notes immediately. We'll be sending you a recording of this entire webinar at your email address. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our amazing panelists for today's discussion who have been seeing this problem in and out. Starting with Shubam Rastogi, founder and CEO Recro. So Shubham is empowering engineers to realize their true potential by working in technology startups and at the same time helping companies find the best developers for their teams that are productive from day zero. We have Savita Hortikar, head of talent acquisition at ThoughtWorks, with over 23 years of experience as a recruitment professional. She's a strong believer that people are the best assets for an organization and scaling hiring is her forte. She's a thought leader and has been sharing her knowledge to help recruitment professionals overcome challenges in their respective careers. Finally, we have Naren Krishna, an angel investor and entrepreneur by heart and design. He has built and scaled two HR tech products previously, Stockroom.io and Equip.in. The initiatives Naren has conceptualized in the diversity and inclusion space have been trendsetters and one of its kind that has impacted a lot of job seekers. Hope all our viewers will take home the learnings of a crash course on solution to candidate dropouts, starting with the problem itself. Maybe I'll let any of the panelists, maybe Shubham can take a dig at this. What is the
Sure.
reason of candidate dropout? Is it employers' lack of attractiveness or candidates' greed?
Correct. Okay. Again, candidates greed or some very strong words here, but I would like to say it is obviously going to be a lack of attractiveness if you're seeing it from a recruitment from a sales perspective, right? Because at the end of the day, you should be able to understand what your customer wants, and if we treat, for example, our candidates as our customers, we should be able to understand not just the competency level. We should be able to understand much more deeper in terms of their aspirations. Why are they actually looking out for a job? What is they are looking from the next job? If we know those pain points clearly, I think then you are able to build much better proposition for them, and then you are able to attract them. Otherwise, if you're just trying to put up a template, there is no magical template available to probably solve this problem. You have to have personalized solutions, and the deeper you understand, the better you understand your candidate, the more customized or the most personalized opportunities you can provide for them. So that is what I see. So it's purely attractiveness. Greed, I don't think is the right word here, because obviously you buy any product, and it's not about greed, and you have to treat jobs as a product, and your end consumer as your candidate here. So yeah, that's my take.
Got it. Naren, Savita, you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I think plus one to what Shubham says, and also I do think it's also a factor of the market. See, offer declines always happen. It's a free market, and then there are jobs available. And for the last 20 plus years, I've been in this domain. It's never been a scenario where everyone accepts your job. There will be people who drop out. So there is certain threshold what you can take or build it into your planning, 10 or 12% or whatever it is for your industry and for your domain, and then you factor that into your into your plans itself. It's only when it goes beyond 20%, that 25% it begins to hurt, especially for niche skills, difficult to find tech skills. And we have seen that the market is very vibrant in the last 1.5 year. People have a lot of choice, and even an above average candidate, or an average candidate, I should say, with average skills is getting multiple job offers. And also the fact in the India market, it is seen this job declines, offer declines happens
also because of the notice period. That is the big pain for us. With the 2 months, most of the companies having 2 months notice period, it really hurts the prospective employers, because when people get jobs, they do, there's a lot of peer pressure and people who say that, let's go and find, if I can find a better deal. So yeah, a lot of factors contribute to it. I wouldn't want to call it a candidate's greed. I just think people, when they're making a move, want the best for themselves, and there's nothing wrong in a free market for people to look around. Yeah.
Got it.
No,
Got it. Naren,
Awesome.
yeah, you have to add to
Yeah,
that.
I think I completely agree with what Savita and Shubham are saying, especially a point that Savita had mentioned about notice period, especially in terms of leading a lot of placements at Scalar. This is one key issue that we have been identifying, wherein it took us a lot of effort to sort of like convince a company to look at a candidate with 3 months notice period, right? Because there was an intrinsic fear, so as to the fact that the candidate might get a better opportunity, which means all the energy and time that I have invested in terms of hiring this candidate goes for a toss. I think I, I do understand from a business standpoint, so as to like why a lot of companies might have a 3 month notice period, but I think that's definitely something which is hurting candidate dropout ratio for sure. Two, I think, I mean, from whatever experience that I have had, in fact, like I had very personal conversations with people to understand like why people are saying no to a certain offer and accepting a certain offer. I feel candidate dropout ratio is actually a function of employer branding in itself. I feel a lot of times a candidate already makes up his or her mind way before even the interview process starts. It's just that you end up realizing it much later. But I think by ensuring that there's sort of like right systems and right engagement in a personalized way, at least if you're able to get those insights much in advance, I think it's going to definitely help. But yeah, notice period definitely I see is like one of the major factors which is actually impacting this.
Employer branding. Got it. But that
Yeah,
brings
yeah.
me to another question related to this, Naren. And if you can, this is sort of a counter question, that if we are saying that this is not candidates' greed, and in fact, it is more around
Hmm.
employer branding and communication, why is it that the
Right.
candidates don't inform about their back out even very close to the joining dates, right? As you told, they would have made up their minds much earlier that they're not going to join anyway. They still do not communicate this professionally to the employers, right? And we have seen this phenomena very less in the US. We've spoken to a couple of
Hmm.
recruiters and founders there. They say that offer
Right.
renex is something which is extremely rare, right? And which brings me to Savita's point, which was that notice periods being very long in the Indian scenarios, where people have around 60 days of time where they can interview. So this brings back to a professional behavior which is very candidate specific and not really employer specific, right? So Naren, if you can start on this.
Yeah, sure. No, I think you're making a very valid point, Anurag. I mean, if I have to look at it from a very crude sense, there's nothing for me to lose. I think it's sort of a behavior that, hey, look, I at least want to know what's on the table and then probably take a call. And of course, there's no penalty system, and ideally, there shouldn't be any penalty system as well, because ultimately, it's your job. You spend almost majority of your time there, so it's completely fair to sort of like pick and choose what you think is right for your career. But I think the reason why candidates, probably to answer your question, why candidates probably wouldn't do it is just to see like what's on the table, and probably also to get like a feeler of like am I probably misjudging this company, right, at a very early stage. Maybe like once I start getting to see how things work in terms of interview, or once I start meeting people in the interview, maybe I mean my opinion might change. Is probably a reason why people would still want to explore, right? Very rarely, if a candidate is very clear that, hey, look, this is the company I would definitely not want to go to, I've rarely seen people saying that, hey, look, I'm not interested in the opportunity. People say, hey, I mean, I would want to know more and probably evaluate it. So I think it's that's something which always been there in India, because right now there are too many opportunities, especially with the startup boom happening, which means people would want to have options and then evaluate. So that's how I look at it. It's a very market driven problem. To be honest, I mean, you can't put like a penalty system in place and say that, hey, look, I mean, there's a penalty for you not being professional. So that's how I sort of look at it. But if I have to probably give a advice to any learner, that I would say, look, the world is very small. You end up meeting paths. So as much as possible, try to be transparent and honest about like what you want and what you don't want. But to be honest, it's very tough to like sort of like put any sort of penalty system, which will encourage people to be professional and probably be upfront.
Got
I'd
it.
like to add one thing here. So one question I was just trying to understand, like you mentioned about US and you mentioned about India, right? And then you said like people back out here. So one of the reason I say, like culturally, if you see, we are never taught to say no, right?
Yeah.
So like I don't know whether you guys have experienced dating platforms or not. I have, and the way you say no is just block that guy, right?
Right.
Or block that girl, right? It's very hard to say no if after spending, and you form that kind of a relationship with the recruiter as well, right? So as far as I know, you've been talking to this guy for 2 months or probably a month, and probably some passive case you're probably talking to 6 months, and so, and then you have to say no, and it becomes very hard because we are not accustomed to saying no, right? I think fundamentally we are not comfortable with that, and that's a behavioral, cultural uh, way of, and we are sentimental people. We feel bad if we have to say to no. It's still better that at least I don't have to hear him
Yeah.
out and just shut him out from the picture. So I think one of the deeper reasons I see where people, even if they want to, they can't say no because it's just so hard for us. And somewhere we need to probably, and the way to solve this is basically make and build that kind of a relationship where accepting a no is easier for a recruiter, right? And even for a candidate, he should be comfortable saying a no, like, and that is where recruiter has to build that kind of a relationship with the candidate, where the guy is so much comfortable that he can say, okay, I really like, we have spent some time, but now I don't think we can take it ahead because my aspirations are somewhere different and met at a different organization. So I think that is one of the biggest reason, I think,
Yeah.
where like it's exclusive up when you compare this with US.
Got it.
Yeah, yeah, and then I also want to add one thing. See, we need to step back a little bit and look at the bigger problem here. In most of the organizations, it's about just filling numbers for the recruitment team. There's very less investment done in making recruiters into talent advisors, in saying that how do you deal with candidates, in training panelists to give a good experience to the candidates. As much as it's a recruiter's job to give or a schedule, or a person who's coordinating to give a good experience to the candidate, it is also the people who they meet during the interview process who have to kind of be the to be the face of the company. They need to give them a view of what the culture is of the company when they come in, and what to expect and how the company is, right? They have to live the values of the company in that short period of 1 or 2 hours that they are talking to the candidate. And people overlook that. In most of the organizations, recruiting is like this difficult job that is outsourced to someone, to one recruitment team, and it is the recruitment team's headache to figure out how to fill in the numbers. And everyone just wants to see the X number of people onboarded at the end of the month. So I think companies should start realizing that there is a lot of investment that you need to do in recruiting, whether it's employer branding, training your recruiters, training your panelists, have a proper interview structure in place, have a competency-based recruiting process where you talk to candidates and ask what is important for the job, and rather not just be open-minded. And also train the recruiters to have a good communication with the candidates. Most of the times, if you're doing like in ThoughtWorks, we have a direct recruitment process where we don't use external partners. So the recruiter is in touch with the candidate from day zero. So there is a lot of relationship built. So although we do have offer declines in the last 1 year has been difficult for us as well, we have never had a scenario, or we had maybe 1% of people who actually told us 1 week before they joined most of them tell us much earlier in the process, the moment they get an offer after 15, 20 days or within 1 month. So we have ample time to build a backup or have a backup strategy for that. So this happens because of the relationship the candidates have built. And a lot of time candidates, what we have seen in the last 6 months is that people have joined some other company because they got some X percentage more money. But then when they went in, they figured out that it was not a good place for them, although the money was good. And they came back to us and said that we will accept the same offer. And it has happened so many cases that, so this will happen only if the recruiter has built that relationship with them to come back to us. And they said that, we want to accept the offer and come back. So I just do think that there's a lot of investment in terms of training that needs to be done for all the parties involved, other than the employer branding piece, which is, again, I think we can talk about it in this conversation. But yeah, but training and making the panelists learn how to do interviews, do's and don'ts, and having a proper structure and having this communication with the candidates to tell them what to expect. Tell them in the beginning, we have 5 rounds, we have 6 rounds, whatever it is, and it's going to take us 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Tell them that. Sometimes also the lack of communication also puts off the candidate, and they won't know what to expect, and also give the feedback, sharing the feedback. Those are all some very baseline things what I think every organization should do to get this, to solve this problem, rather than only look at the end result and say, how do I reduce it, and I put more money in branding or I give more goodies. I don't think that's the answer to the problem.
Okay, so Savita clearly is saying that gifting of BMW bikes to your candidates will not help, right?
It'll only give you more followers on Twitter, maybe. It'll go viral for one day.
Right. Now, that brings me to another interesting point, Savita, that as you told, right? Now, if a candidate accepts some other offer, that clearly shows that a candidate likes someone else more than they like you, right? Now, are companies themselves, I know Savita has put this whole mantle on the recruiters, but as companies, are we presenting the best face of ourselves to the candidates, or there is still some scope left to impress upon the candidate when it all boils down to employer branding? And how likely is it that a candidate likes you? Because Savita has clearly seen people have liked ThoughtWorks as an organization, as a culture, which is why even if they're getting more elsewhere, when they see a bad culture, they come back to you. How do you
Yeah.
exactly build this relationship, and what exactly you would say that, okay, this is enough, this is what I do, and not beyond that, right? How much is that optimum? How do you build that?
Yeah, I'll give my thoughts and others can add as well. So what I'm trying to say here is that one is that you give a good training to the recruiters, and we have invested in the schedulers or talent tops, as we call them, who are going to be the interface for the interview process, especially now because everything is remote, 100% remote, and it's very hard to build this direct connect and rapport because you're not even meeting any the candidate at any point in time. Everything is on Zoom or Microsoft Teams. So we have this. We've given them the talking points. We have told them that these are the steps what need to be followed. We have given them a proper training to say that with every candidate, this is what you need to do. Here is what you need to explain. This is an email. There's a email with the template all written down that goes to every candidate when they have to come in for an interview, telling them this is the process, this is the stuff, books, or this is a reading what you need to do before coming in for this technical round of interview, and this is what you can expect. So we kind of, the recruiter tries to prep the candidate. One is that it helps in building rapport. The second one is also it helps in better conversion, because the candidate also knows that these are the ABCD things that I need to brush up before I come in for the interview with this organization. So all that, putting all that system in place, the processes in place, has helped us in the long run. We started doing this about 4 or 5 years back, but we're seeing the good results right now. And like I said, every organization has to acknowledge that hiring is a difficult job, and just giving the numbers on the recruiting lead or the manager and asking them to fill in X numbers is not the answer to the problem. There has to be a budget and training allocation, budget that has to be given to set right all these processes, and also train a panelist. People forget that the panelist who is taking the interview, the tech person, or the person, the BU lead or head or whoever closes the interview process plays a very, very big role in impressing on the candidate, because the candidate intrinsically knows that, oh, recruiter is trying to sell the job. They want us to join the company. But where they're going to get all the doubts clarified, whether it's about the career progression or about the work they do or the product they're building or the services they're offering, will come from the panelist itself. So I think it's very critical that that part, though those people are also trained well in this, and of course the communication piece is very important.
Yeah,
Got it. So
I
please.
think I completely I think I completely agree with what Savita was telling. In fact, I recently had a very interesting insight because most of the times the general perception is the role of recruiter is to sell the job, which means if I'm practically interviewing a candidate, I do not need to do any bit of selling, which means the recruiter has already sold the job, or has already sold the employer brand to the candidate. But trust me, I mean that's a very, very wrong assumption. I think I have seen cases where people have said, I don't want to accept this offer because I had a bad experience with a certain panelist, in whatever way, right? So I think it's very important to train your panelists. It's important to set some process, because a lot of times what might also happen that panelists, from the amount of rules that you set for your panelists is going to be super, super important. Because that is actually the first touch point a candidate would ideally have with someone internally in your company, apart from the recruitment team, right? Or potentially, if a person is hiring for his or her team, I it's important that the panelists are also making the right impression. It can be as small as, again, just introducing themselves and talking a little bit about the team, right? Don't like straight away like jump into interview. Talk a little bit, try to understand the candidate a little bit. I think these are the smaller things that makes a lot of difference. In fact, I wouldn't probably want to take the name of the company, but one of my friend has attended an interview in this company, and the room in which the interview was happening, the moment he entered, there was a small note from the entire team about it. There was a small well thought book that they have given to him. So the candidate could clearly see that there was a lot of thought put into this entire experience, right? It was not as simple as probably just giving goodies as well, but there was a lot of personalization involved, right? And when the interviewer had come, the interviewer had introduced himself. He tried to understand the candidate, and then they sort of like got into interview. So I feel post that interview, I think the candidate was already sold that, hey, look, the culture is so great that I would definitely want to work with this person, right? So I think that's a very, very important problem to be solved, is what I personally feel. And I have like had a lot of insights from candidates who have taken interviews through Scalar, right? And people end up saying that, hey, look, sometimes I'm so impressed with the panelists that I would definitely want to work with such people.
Got it. Yeah, Shubham, you wanted to add something to that.
Yes, so Anurag, so what we see from the entire candidate experience per se, right? Like you have to divide the entire journey into multiple stages. And what we have tried to do here at Recro, at least, is basically try to have some sort of an NPS score coming out whenever an exit is happening from this journey, right? In that sense, that also gives an indication of what is going wrong or where are the metrics going wrong. Otherwise, because when you're dealing in volume, right, then it becomes a really difficult task to understand what's going wrong. So one thing that we have done is basically try to divide the entire candidate journey into multiple stages, and then look at it and how we can then probably understand the metrics and also create moments of delight across these stages, right? For example, how do we ensure a more efficient, let's say, for example, a hacker round or a technical screening round, for example. Then what could be the challenge, and then write down challenges for each stage, and then see how we can convert each of these challenges into probably a moment of delight for the candidate, and then the overall thing compounds, and you have a great experience for the candidate. And so employer branding is there, but again, if your experience is not good, like people would, I've seen leave very big brands as well, even if just because the experience was bad in recruiting. So I also can't take names here, but again, I've seen a lot of really big brands with a lot of venture capital money having a very, I would say very lagged down kind of interview experience for candidates.
Yeah.
Got it. Got it. So, yeah, Savita, you're saying something.
I'm saying the candidate experience should be a centerpiece of your selection process, irrespective of the outcome. It doesn't matter because every person who comes to your company is a ambassador for your company, whether they get in the job or they don't get the job, whether they get the job and choose to not accept it or accept it, right? So giving
Right.
that experience is very important because a lot of people who may not get through your interview process, if you've given them a good experience, will come back to you. They'll reapply to you because every company has a cooling period and then they want to come back. So we call them silver medalists. So the silver medalists are a big source, a very good source of for the recruiters because then you don't have to sell the job once again to them. They already know about you. So whatever it is, I think candidates experience plays a very important role. And sometimes I do think like how in when you sell a product, you have a customer success manager. We should have something like that even in recruiting a new job or a role which has to be created, whose only job is to see customer delight. And
Right.
I mean, in today's world, I feel that one new job in the new age has to be created by all companies. You can call it whatever you want to, but I think something like that we should replicate in recruiting organizations.
Absolutely, absolutely. Since so we are all boiling down to the same thing that it is essentially selling off a company to a candidate that should happen or that should be the centerpiece of the hiring process, right? But can we have at least one best practice from all of you that should be deployed in order to elevate that candidate experience? We can start with Naren. One best practice that you think Naren already gave one about the book and everything, but yeah, if you can just add one more best practice to elevate the candidate experience in totality, and it could not just be the candidates who accept an offer or get selected, because nurturing relationships with your candidates across all cycles is very important, as all of you highlight. So, best practice across any of the journeys in the area.
Sure. I think the most fundamental thing that is very important is value a candidate's time. I think when a candidate is spending good amount of time in interviewing for your company, do value and make the process very seamless and transparent, because most of the times I see candidates getting very disheartened or probably very disappointed because the process itself is not clear. Two, I think it's about ensuring that you sort of have those right checkpoints, right, at every stage. It can start as early as probably a candidate has even applied for your company, right, even before that. So I think having the right touch points and understanding the feedback and probably acting on that feedback is going to be super important. I think a lot of insights that come from this can be helpful for every company. But I think at the core, having showing that value to time, I think that is going to be super important.
So, value to time in some manner, right? Got it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
Your thoughts.
Yeah, so one of the things that we have to look at from a candidate process point is basically we can have some SLAs again, like in terms of and setting the expectation right in terms of what is the process going to look like upfront, right at the beginning of the process, and tell them, okay, this is going to take, because we otherwise get anxious if we don't get status of what's happening with our profiles, right? So like, and having proper SLA that are being tracked both at a management level, even in the organization, right, for candidates. I think that is something that ensures that probably we are doing justice to the amount of time that someone is spending with us, and then probably your entire experience goes very well. So that is something that I think has the biggest impact. If you have very well defined SLAs within the team and you put a very right expectation in front of the candidate that this is the stages that we have and this is approximately the time that will take, each stage will take.
Got it. So that means communicating to the candidate what the interview process is like, or maybe right before every interview, communicating to the candidate that, okay, here, this is the interview
Correct.
that is going to be held with this person, and quick intro about that person.
Correct. Setting the expectations right and building a transparent interviewing process, and giving them the entire overview of how it is going to be, rather than it's going to be a surprise driven.
Yeah.
Right, right. So, yeah, Savita, please go ahead.
Yeah, the one thing I want to add, other than what Shubham and Naren have also said, one is the candidate experience is definitely important than setting all his expectation communication piece, and the other is a post engagement, post offer engagement. We need to have some plan in place if it, depending on what you have in terms of bandwidth or your budgets. Have a engagement process where you'll have a periodic connect with your candidates, bring your the senior folks of that particular business unit on to talk. We do something called meet and greet in ThoughtWorks on Zoom, because we no longer go to office. But then, but something similar to that, every company does have some lightweight process like that, post offer engagement. But I think that is very important from 2 points. One is that you'll get a good sense whether that person is going to join you or not. And typically, we do the post offer engagement 1 month, where we bring people on a call 1 month before they join. And if they don't join, then it's a very clear indication that they're not going to join you, or they are shopping around for offers. So you'll have time to have for a backup strategy. Then and also the other thing is, I think it's also a lot of things have to do with the market. Once the market stabilizes, so then people shopping for offers will get less. But in general, this whole candidate experience, good branding, and giving that importance to recruiting. See, a lot of businesses, like I said, for me, that's the biggest uh, pain point, or rather, as I see in all organizations, is that people do not invest in the recruitment team like they invest in their tech folks, for learning, for training, for growth, career opportunities. That has to happen, and only then it should it's not a organization of like an operations role that you just outsource your problem to a bunch of people, right? So yeah. The
Absolutely. Very well said, Savita. We have
yeah,
many people who agree with you. We have many recruiters who are saying they agree with
yeah,
Savita. But clearly,
absolutely.
so this is not a well defined KPI for any of them, right? So who owns this candidate dropout, right? Does this fall on the recruiter again? And as you told, there is no training that is standardized for a recruiter that this is what you should be doing. So how should this be brought into effect? Because this eventually has to be run by the recruiters who are talking to the candidates.
See, if you have a system wherein you have a hiring manager and a business unit for which you're hiring for, I think it should be co-owned by the business and the recruitment team, because both of them have a role to play in it. It is not. It should. I don't think the recruitment and the recruiters only should be penalized for saying, "Oh, you have so many candidate dropouts." It is not correct. It is not true. It is not correct. And if you do that, you're not going to solve the problem. It has to be co-owned, and they should always, like, hiring is a partnership. Then that's, I mean, in all sense, whether it is for candidate engagement or for hiring, the recruiter, there's only so much what a recruitment team can do, and there's 50% has to be owned by the company, by the business. And yeah, like, for example, if you look at attrition as a problem in companies, everyone blames the market. And I'm not sure any company has any person or someone in HR or anyone in the business who says, yes, the buck stops here, I'm responsible, that it's my job to see that the attrition reduces from X to X minus something, right? They don't own it. But in recruiting, very, very nicely, the blame is put on the recruitment team. So I think that should stop. It should be co-owned, according to me.
Very well said. Very true. Yeah. So we have Jaydeep Nayak who is asking that also what happens when openly candidate negotiates holding 3 to 4 offers. Is it greed? Shubham, I think you come
Can I
across
answer
this.
this? Yeah. Yes. Day in, day out, right? So I think we have to make first peace with this, right? And I think I've tweeted on this earlier as well. So understand what is job. Job is a very high value transaction, right? Every high value transaction will have such cases. For example, if you're buying a house, you go to multiple builders, right? If you go to buy a car, go to multiple cars. Have you seen salesmen or probably recruiters in that sense, or for example, builders or their sales guys creating a backlist or asking about, is this greed? Why this guy didn't buy a car from me? I will go, I'll do my research, I'll talk to 10 people, whoever gives me a better choice, I will join them. Right. The point here is, I don't know why recruiters are not understanding this. This is a very high value transaction. This transaction decides whether you can buy that house. This decides whether you can buy that car. Now, you can't expect me to probably take that decision because you have been talking to me. Okay, that's fine. That is there. But none of the other industries are actually probably in that mode, right? So you have to respect that. Okay, it's an end of the day the guy's job, but my job is not to curse him and then probably move on to the next guy, right? And put my energies there and probably build a relationship in the future that the guy refers me something. But if you say that, okay, is it greed? I don't believe that, because you have to start treating first is you have to start treating your candidates as your customers. The moment you start doing that, the rest of the answers you will get on your own.
Well
Yeah,
said. Yeah.
agreed.
Anyone else? Yeah.
I think it is. I think big plus one to what Shubham says. But it it hurts the recruiters. So I've gone through this phase when I had begun my career as well. Then every candidate decline was taken very personally. It used to show up in my mood and in all my all to everyone in the home.
Correct. Yeah. So we have next question from Shanmukha. He says, how a recruiter can enhance relationship building with a candidate. I mean, some pointers around how a relationship can be built with a candidate.
Yeah, maybe I can take that.
Yeah.
One is open and transparent communication. That is very important. Giving an idea of what is the process like, how much time it's going to take, what to expect in it, how many rounds of interview, and then sharing feedback. That is very important. And that communication piece, like any relationship, communication plays a very important role here, whether it is you send a mails, and now you have so many modes in which you can communicate to the candidate, figure out what works best for the person, and use those ways of telling them, and being transparent and open. If it is not going well, or if you feel that you're putting the candidate on hold, please let the candidate know that we are speaking to 10 different people, and here are some of the things we are meeting, few of them who have done better. So it is don't that kind of healthy relationship works, I think works better.
Got it. Also, one more follow up to what Naren was asking. Okay, we'll first answer this. Okay, so Surya Teja has to ask, how do we convince candidates to join small and medium sized companies? Most of them want to join big brands, although salaries are good. They hesitate to join. I think Shubham helping a lot of technology startups hire would be the
Right.
best person to take a dig at this. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So see, brand says, but brand is not the only thing that says. Obviously, this is one of the biggest factor. Even if I look at my data right now, right? If I see in terms of why people are backing out or don't join, but obviously there are other factors as well, right? In terms of when we look at, for example, I can talk about developers in our case. There is obviously brand being one, but there's also something called projects. There is also something called technology. There is also something called people, right? So if you can guarantee, let's say we give you the team might be small, 5 people team, but the guys are, let's say, all Ivy Leagues or probably some of the best guys coming out from Amazon and starting something. Yeah, people will join because you're going to be working with some of the best minds, right? It matters whom you are working with. Then the recruiter needs to understand what is the team, and that's where we also try to understand what's the kind of customer. Even if it's a customer, don't take it's a 5-member team or 10-member team. See the kind of guys that are coming into that kind of a startup, right? So once you are selling the candidate, you don't only sell them on probably, let's say, the brand. Obviously, if you don't have the brand in case of small startups and stuff, obviously you have to find your USP there, or as we call employee value propositions, right? And then look at what aligns to this guy. Like, for example, there might be a guy who's working in a very big company on a legacy technology, right? And probably if you give him an opportunity to probably work on new age tech, for example, what's a lot of thing happening right now in Web3 and stuff like that, people would join even at lesser packages because they want to get exposure. They know if they spend around a year with this company, I'm going to dictate the time for the rest of my life, right? So you have to make them understand what is short term, what is long term, right? And how does you play out in their journey in the long term if they take this a short term pain, right? So that is something that as a recruiter, first you need to understand the customer needs and then see what value propositions can you trigger for the candidate from that perspective. I think then it solves. I think that's what we have tried to do when we are actually, let's say, working with smaller companies.
Got it. So
Absolutely.
basically, yeah, Naren, please add to that.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, now that I'm again starting something of my own, I'm sort of like going through the same problem, right? Where someone is good and you need to sort of like ensure that you're attracting that person to sort of like come and join your company, and probably ensure that the person also understands the nuances that come with a early stage startup or probably a small company, right? I think one thing that Shubham had mentioned has been working wonders for a lot of founders who have the ability to attract right talent, is to understand the intent of the person, right? If you don't understand the intent of the person, you will never be able to attract the candidate. Like Shubham rightly mentioned, there might be very senior level folks who might be craving for something, right? Who might be probably be craving for a different tech stack, or probably for a 0 to 1 journey, or I know a bunch of people who currently probably would look for a much bigger leadership opportunity, right? Which probably they're not getting in the current company. So I think
I think
it sort of becomes easy in terms of whatever pitch that you're giving. I think too, the general concern that people might have joining a early stage company or a small company is that, I mean, can I be financially secure, right? I mean, like, while that's probably a slightly relevant question to ask in the current times, given that startups are also getting funded very well. But still, I mean, by and large, I mean, that remains a question. So it's important for you to give some sort of comfort level to the person, explain what are your cash flows like, explain where you are, give some comfort level in terms of showing some financial security to the candidate, right? I mean, a lot of good candidates who want to join a startup, I've seen them asking, hey, what are your cash flows like? I mean, what is your runway like, right? So I think it's okay to have the transparent discussion and tell them that, hey, look, I mean, this is where we are, and from a financial standpoint, I mean, you need not definitely worry, or give him that comfort. And last but not the least, I think if you use ESOPs as a very powerful narrative, if you are able to sort of build confidence so as to why ESOPs really matter, give them, share some personal stories, right? I think that is also a huge motivator for people to sort of take that risk and come and join you in terms of your journey. So these are like three things that have been helping me so far very well. And with whatever conversations I've been having with a lot of early stage founders, if you're able to get the intent right, give a little bit of financial security. And third, ensure that you're showing a very clear growth path for the person. I think they should be able to take the bet.
Got it. So very valid question again from Randeep. Is this situation because of startups as they are ready to hire at any cost? Also, I have a follow up to this. Now that the funding situation is sort of dwindling, do you see the tables turning in the favor of recruiters? Yeah, but first, this question: is the situation because of startups as they are ready to hire at any cost? Who wants to go at this?
I'll go if you want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Please go ahead.
Yeah,
So the
go ahead,
order.
go ahead, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm
So
sure you
if
and
you
me
see,
will be
I
going through this problem very often.
correct. So I don't think like this would be happening. I don't see tables turning. At least the kind of reports that I've been reading in terms of the tech shortage that is there. So obviously the salaries might normalize a bit, but I don't see in India anything going down because it's not just startups that are now though, because remote has also go like I'll say like around 50 to 60% of our hiring right now is on purely on remote, right? So even to higher numbers, right? So what I'm trying to say is even if there is a startup lag, there are enterprises from US who have started aggressively hiring in India now, and
Yep.
and they have all the money in the bank to do what startups were doing. So I don't see that is going to go away anytime, and and it's going to be like that. You have to address that. Obviously, companies like Scalar will increase the supply and obviously will ease that out. But salaries might normalize. You might not see crazy numbers like what is happening, but the demand will not go away, right? It's not going away. And even if you see the layoffs, right, which people are saying, just analyze those layoffs and see it is a very different picture for techies there. I don't really see a lot of proportion from developer side being taking a hit. I think it's more of non-dev roles that are taking a hit. Even if you see analyze all the layoffs across these companies.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think just to add on to what Shubham is saying, I think overall tech innovation has accelerated, but I think it hasn't slowed down, and that's going to be the scenario. Which means as long as the tech innovation is accelerating, I think good talent is always in demand, and you would need more techies to come and solve these problems. And in regards to the layoffs, I think what Shubham said is like absolutely right. If you analyze the data, I think that's what you would probably figure out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. So we are almost time. We'll take just one question. What can you do differently if the interview is online? Okay. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
Savita,
can
please go
take
ahead.
that. So if the interview is on, and before that, I just have one point to add that the recruiters, when you're hiring, you should define your target segment properly when you source candidates. Like you look at what company you're hiring for, which company, what is their organization, and target that kind of people. For example, if you are in a large company and you want to, don't go and target the folks from startup world. They will not come, or people who have worked only in startups. That identifying them simply based on key skills, finding candidates from job portals, or whether even if you're using vendors or LinkedIn or whatever may be your source, is not going to help. So that's very, very important. It's a general tip for recruiters. Okay, coming back to this question, right? Sorry, what was the question? It was on
It was on interviews that since the entire
interview online.
conversation.
Okay, so I'll tell you what we did and what has worked for us. One is that since interviews were on Zoom, we tried to replicate the process as it is when the person comes to the office. So in Zoom, you can create meeting rooms. We can breakout rooms. That's a good concept that is there. So we create those breakout rooms and we replicate it. We bring the candidate and the coordinator, the recruiter, whoever is coordinating the interview, into one room. They do an introduction. They wait for the panelists to come in. Then the recruiter, the scheduler. I mean, it takes up a lot of bandwidth, but it is totally worth doing. In the beginning, there's a lot of pushback, but I think that's the best process. And then the recruiter introduces the candidate to the panelist who's joining, and they finish the interview. Then there is one other breakout room where the recruiter or the scheduler is temporarily waiting until the interview gets over. I mean, they can do the other work, whatever they want to do, but they have a breakout room for themselves. And once that is done, the person leaves the candidate in that room and moves to the breakout room where the recruiter is present, and they discuss the feedback. And then they bring the candidate back into this meeting room. So it kind of replicates exactly how you do in office. No, you give them a good experience, you talk to them, and then you give them the feedback. There and so all that process of being there and coordinating and being available to start the interview to end the interview, although it's a lot of overhead and requires a lot of bandwidth, especially in a Zoom setup, is totally worth it. So those who don't have coordinators in their teams to do all this, it's worth investing and getting coordinators in the team rather than ask the recruiter to do everything themselves, which is going to be very hard for recruiters to do.
Got it. Wonderful idea there, Savita. So at the end, just from every one of you, just a one-liner conclusion on. I agree. There's no silver bullet to solving candidate dropouts. It's
Yeah.
recruiters and a company's personality that has to come across over the entire hiring process. But if you were to summarize your experience of solving candidate dropouts and just share one of the best practices of solving or reducing candidate dropouts, as asked by Pratyansha Juni, we can start with Shubham. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the biggest thing is mapping out the entire journey and putting checkpoints at each one of them. I think that has been the biggest thing. When you look at the entire problem, it looks very big, but if you divide the entire thing into sub stages and then try to solve for it, it becomes easier. So divide the entire journey, map out the entire candidate journey. I think that is very critical. From the point you show him, make himself aware, to the point he actually takes a decision. Divide that into multiple sub stages, and then create multiple points for your team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Savita, if you can go next. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, the best practice is one is to, I mean, there are a couple of things which can be put together as one point. One is to identify your target segment well and do a proper pre-screening of the candidate. to find out, whether they're really interested to join, why are they joining, what do they want to do, so that you will, back of your mind, you will know, if I'm presenting 10 candidates to my hiring manager, then maybe these 4-5 are just, are people who you can expect that they will not get through, or they will drop out through the process or not accept your offer. So the recruiter should be completely aware about the candidate very well. So that is completely in the recruiter's control, right? So that's one thing that's very important.
God, maybe Naren can conclude. Yeah.
Yeah, I think probably immediate intervention would be to sort of have touch points at every part of the process and analyze the data that you're getting. The good part about analyzing the data is you would slowly start understanding certain patterns, which means, let's say, if there is a recruiter who is putting in a lot of effort to source candidates from a certain company or from, let's say, a certain demographic, let's say startups, right? Maybe if you're understanding that a lot of people coming from this demographic are leading into offer dropouts, maybe you spending a lot of time there wouldn't really make sense. So I think sort of having these touch points and don't just leave the data there, try to analyze the data and probably come up with the right sort of strategies. I think that's going to be super important. And two, I think a long-term solution definitely I feel would be to focus on employer brand. I still feel candidate dropout as a problem is a smaller set of the larger problem, which is employer brand. If you're able to do the right things to ensure that your employer brand is in place, probably a candidate would already come with a positive impression of the employer, and probably things might work in your favor. So I think, yeah, the short-term solution is to have those frequent touch points, analyze the data, and ensure that you have meaningful interventions with the data that you get. And two, I think from a long-term perspective, always keep focusing on your employer brand. How people perceive your company even before they apply for a job, I think is going to be super, super important.
Yeah.
Great, great. So that is all for now. Thank you so much, Shubham, Naren, and Savita, for joining us on today's session. I'm sure it has been very, very insightful for all of us in this session, even for me. So I would sum this up by saying that there's no silver bullet to solving candidate dropouts. But if you can come across as a company, if you can come across as more desirable for candidates, it would eventually solve your problem of candidate dropouts. Also, it has to be a candidate experience centric hiring process. Hiring is not about buying, it is about selling. As long as we stick to that basic, I think we'll be doing a fair job at solving candidate dropouts. So that is all from our side, everyone. All of you will be getting recorded a video of this webinar. So thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you again for our amazing panelists. It was great, great to have you here. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Anurag.
Shubham.
For having
Thanks,
us.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Anurag.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.